Christian and I here for Card Player TV for another edition of Strategy. I've got Isaac Barron here. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about the move, an overbet as a bluff. First of all, can you explain exactly what that is and why it's effective?
Yeah, an overbet as a bluff is usually happens on the river when you think that your opponent will call a normal sized bet, but he may fold to an overbet, which is like a more than pot sized bet. It's like a lot of times all in, and so yeah.
What are your considerations before making that last move? Leading up to the river, do you have to be pretty sure that they don't have like a pretty strong hand, or I mean, what are you kind of thinking?
Yeah, well, a lot of times it depends on who my opponent is. Like, if he's a less sophisticated opponent, I may not be thinking like as much about what he has, just more that he doesn't want to maybe call off all his chips or something like that. So the overbet might work in that scenario, whereas like a normal size bet where he still would have chips left wouldn't work because he'd call. But if it's like a more sophisticated opponent, I guess it's just kind of like our history and what he's thinking, I'm thinking, and et cetera, and yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, as a high-stakes cash game player, of course, you have to vary your game. So how are you throwing in different hands, like not betting as a bluff, but are you shoving, a couple of your strong hands too, just to show them that it could be either one?
Yeah, it's definitely important to not only like be shoving like your strong hands, but maybe have some like some medium strength value hands that he wouldn't expect you to be overbetting. Like, so if you're overbetting and he knows that you either have the nuts or nothing, a lot of times, I mean, he's going to be able to call because it's a lot easier to have nothing than it is to make the nuts. So it's important to have like a range where you can be value betting less strong hands than just like nut type hands.
Now, a bluff like this, you have to be a lot more sure it's going to work than, bluffing 2/3 of the pot because you're risking so much, right?
Right, yeah. Mathematically, like betting over the pot has to work more often than like betting 2/3 of the pot. Otherwise, like you're just losing money basically in the long run. So, yeah, it's definitely a high variance play, but it's definitely, especially versus sophisticated opponents, it's something that I think is important to implement.
It seems like one of those moves that really good players have found out to do, because before, overbetting the pot wasn't something that anybody thought was a good idea. But is it still working in like the super high stakes games?
Well, I think for players who use the play really well and are really good at balancing like their value and their bluff hands, it still works definitely. But yeah, there definitely are a lot of players who kind of just do it to do it, and they don't necessarily know why they're doing it. They just have seen it maybe on a card runner's video or something like that, and they just think that it's a cool play. But as long as you know why you're doing it and doing it effectively, I think it's still definitely a good tool to use.
Would you not recommend then for lower stakes players to try this move? Because a lot of people just might be like, hey, I have top pair. Yeah. I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, well, it's definitely important to know your opponent when you're doing the move. And, yeah, if you're playing against like an unsophisticated opponent who's not really thinking about your bet sizing or the strength of your hand, he's more just thinking about his hand strength and stuff like that, then, yeah, a move like this really isn't really that good of a move to use.
Would you say it's more of a cash game move than a tournament move?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, I have seen there are people who have started doing it in tournaments, and I'm not going to say that it's terrible in general, but it's not something that I really do, except for like if I don't do it as a bluff. Like if I'm not going to say never, but usually if I'm overbetting shoving on the river, it's against a bad player who I just think is never going to fold, so I just want to bet all my chips. And I just don't think it's really necessary to implement stuff like overbetting in tournaments, since it's such like a small sample size and you're usually not playing against like the same opponent and stuff like that. So a lot of times it's just really not worth it.
Thank you so much, Isaac.
Thanks a lot.
Christina with Isaac Byrne for Card Player TV.